Woman priests? Same-sex blessings? Abortion? All were discussed at the Synod on Synodality, and in conclusion, nothing changed. While most Catholics let out a sigh of relief, Father James Martin and other activists in the church were not very pleased. One thing no one was pleased about was the reinstatement of disgraced and excommunicated priest Mark Rupnik. According to reporters on the ground, the room was shocked upon hearing the news and confused when Pope Francis delivered off-the-cuff remarks ripping, "Priests who like nice cassocks?" We cut through the meeting on meetings and lay out exactly what to expect going forward. Over at Disney,
it's no longer 1937.
Not going to be saved by the prince.
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love.
Oof. The disastrous marketing campaign for the upcoming Snow White film attracted a challenger. The Daily Wire is creating a Snow White film of their own, minus the 7 racially ambiguous short people. Their version will be featured on BentKey, a new streaming service for children's content. Erica gives us a quick review of how it looks so far. And if you've ever wondered how we got from beautiful courthouses in small towns to drop ceilings and fluorescent lights in government buildings, we've got you covered in the Twilight Zone. All this and more on this week's edition of the LOOPcast. Welcome to the LOOPcast. Today I'm joined as always by my co-hosts Erica and Josh. And today the church survives the synod. Barely. A lot of headlines coming out of there. We are here to assure you the church survived. Yes, indeed, the church survived. But there's a few elements to the final document that was put out. Some of the Rupnik Scandal, and then the Clericalism comments from Pope Francis. They've all kind of been floating around independent of each other. We're going to try to put them all together today. So Erica, could you just start us? What happened at the synod? What was their conclusion?
Well, the big news about the synod is that nothing much happened. I do want to clarify, though, it's not over yet. So hold your breath, take a nap, because they're coming back next year to apparently finish the deed or continue the discussion or embark on the process or have more dialogues about all of these issues and experiences that they've had. The final document that came out, and I'm just going to say, I tried to read it. It's a slog. I'm going to read you one little word salad that I found in there. The burning question of this synod, it's called, we've had like the synod on the Amazon region, we've had the synod on Africa, synod on the family. I'm going to get into in a few minutes like how many synods we've had since the Vatican II Council.
Answer, more than we need.
More than we need. Like
this one was called the Synod on Synodality, correct?
Right. So translate that, the meeting on the meetings.
Yeah.
And so the burning question was, what is synodality? That's what all these people were coming. Don't you wonder, Josh?
Well, and the follow-up question to that is, when are we going to have the synod on the synod on the synod?
Oh, that's next year. Yeah, it's coming. They're going to meet again about how they met about meetings this year.
You're a fellow 80s girl. Like,
yeah.
It's like the never-ending story. They made the movie The Never-Ending Story, and then they made a sequel. If the first one didn't end, why do you need another one? I don't understand this.
Meanwhile, the African cardinal's like, I got to go back because people are getting martyred in my diocese.
Yeah.
We'll come back to a meeting next year. But here's our best answer word salad. Those of you who have studied long and hard in the ivory tower might be able to parse this. Synodality, this is the final say. What is synodality? Synodality can be understood as the walk of Christians with Christ, they mentioned Jesus, that's good, toward the kingdom, together with all humanity. Mission-oriented, it involves coming together in assembly at the different ecclesial levels of life, listening to one another, dialogue, communal discernment, consensus building, as an expression of Christ making himself present alive in the Spirit, and decision-making in differentiated co-responsibility. Did everyone get that? Everyone got that.
I hope you guys have coffee, man. Like I
actually got extra large coffee double shot.
Wait, did we just start a recording? I fell asleep. What happened?
Okay.
Seriously, man.
Basically, the what I can come up with, the synod is they all came together. The organizers, the goal of this synod was to meet and to listen and dialogue and have communal discernment. That this idea that Christ makes himself known through our own experiences. I mean, not through a definitive revelation of his coming to earth in the incarnation through his passion, death, and resurrection. He has given us the definitive revelation. No. We got to sit around and listen. The synod is waiting for Godot. It's waiting for Guffman. It's waiting for the snark. It's hunting the snark. It's never going to happen.
Erica, if I could ask that, because that word salad made it seem like this is all kind of meaningless, pointless. but people were so concerned about it.
Right.
My question then is, why were people really concerned about it if this just ended up being a word salad?
Right. Like, I want to make light of it because in a way you have to laugh or you're going to cry. But it could have been a lot worse because all of this word salad is a method. It's a mode of coming together, and embedded in it are a lot of progressive ideologies. I would even say anti-Catholic ideologies who just couldn't wait to get women's ordination on the table, to get LGBT on the table. I know
Abortion.
Josh has a lot to say. Abortion was there. We'll get into that too.
I mean, it's just, this weird, crazy ChatGPT synod final statement thing is just, it's so unimaginative and unoriginal, but you can still at its heart see this like love it has for this desire, this aspiration to have gone the full Monty, right? To have gone the full 9 yards, to say, we're a new church and we're going to do this and that. And it came up short. And I think part of the reason it came up short is precisely because Catholics who care about their faith, who care about their church, decided to stand up and make a difference. I know here at CatholicVote, we dedicated a ton of resources to making sure that we would get the word out. Like at the beginning of this synod, they said, oh, it's all closed to the press and there's not going to be anything going on here. And thank the good Lord, there were some brave men and women, the courageous cardinals who stepped forward and did that dubia letter. We publicized that. We had reporters on the ground at Rome working overtime, trying to get every last piece of information out there and share it with everyone, here in the United States and whoever around the world or whatever. And I think, that kind of action was necessary to make sure that this did not go completely, totally off the rails. I feel like that it became somewhat of a nothing burger is a great gift. And it's never, I like to tell people just because the church is saved from total destruction doesn't mean there can't be horrible things that happen, like the church being like asleep at the wheel, the church kind of leading people astray. I mean, even during this synod, we had Pope Francis, inviting in Sister Gramick with the New Ways ministry. It's a horrible thing. It was, telegraphing a message that, he wanted to, as much as he wanted to, try to bless same-sex unions. He even expressed it like, well, the church can kind of bless people, and there's all this kind of talk that was done on the side. That was all, that was the attempt of this synod to try to put a blessing on same-sex couples. That the final document did not have much of anything really at all to say about LGBT groups. And that was much to the dismay of left-wing Cardinal Blaise Supich of Chicago, who kind of was lamenting at the end of the synod, like how it could have done so much more, and there's so much we have to unpack. And
you can tell a lot about the types of people that were upset about this final statement, because again, we just reiterated, we went through it. It was a whole lot of nothing. But I think there were people that were activists within the church that were really hoping for a substantial church doctrine change when it comes to blessing same-sex unions. Father James Martin put out a statement very upset. National Catholic Reporter very upset. Why do you think that do you think this is just a media show, or they actually came in expecting like, oh no, we're going to have real change here, and then just disappointed that they came up short?
I mean, I think they would have at least gotten a line or two that they could have built off for future years. But this, they just ended up with, like I said, a ChatGPT word salad that they can't really do much of all with. They wanted at least a little nugget that they could build and build and build.
And they found one. I do want to say they found one. I read all of Blaise Supich's interview at America. I read Father James Martin's entire reflection on what I learned at the synod. And I mean, the way he presents it is we built bridges. We made friendships with each other. We listened to each other. And then he cites section 15 in the final document, which, while it does not say the alphabet soup LGBTQ explicitly, it does say that we need further study and greater precision. And we'll come back to this because we need more time for reflection. I'm going to quote again, without giving into simplistic judgments that hurt individuals. And he narrowed in on that as this conversation is continuing. We are going to continue. And here's what happens with the lefties. Like, and I'm sorry to call them lefties. I know some people are like, we shouldn't use labels.
Let's be clear about when we call them lefties, what do we mean?
Yeah.
These are people in support of what?
These are people in support of changing church doctrine that is unchangeable. Literally, like they want women's ordination to the diaconate. They want LGBTQ blessings on unions that are outside. And the thing is, this is church teaching. It will not change. And it feels like, I was thinking back to all the history around Humanae Vitae. After Vatican II, there was this promise that came out from some of the progressive elements in the church that, okay, now finally it's going to change. And all these people get all excited. Oh my gosh, I'm a woman. I'm going to be ordained in 5 years. I'm a Catholic couple. I'm throwing out the NFP manual. I'm going to start using birth control, and it's all going to change. And then Humanae Vitae drops in 1968. Nothing changes. And the Pope reiterates, the Pope reiterates the teaching of the church, and thousands of souls are lost. They are lost. And that's what Father James Martin and the progressive element continue to do. They want to push for this synodal model that is unending dialogue, unending process, never any action or statement, because in that confusion, in that like maybe sort of state, you continue to draw along this false hope that somehow the Church of Jesus Christ will fall.
When there's opportunity for error as well. When there's ambiguity, there's opportunity for error.
So, Erica, you're right, of course, that the church teaching did not formally change with, the battle over contraception in the 60s and Humanae Vitae being published. But the de facto church policy sort of did, in the fact that basically Father Curran's whole topic of your alma mater.
Yeah. Not a shining moment for Catholic University. We got that.
It's all about your conscience and conscience be your guide and blah, 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 blah. And so then you get to the situation where, you look back in history, for example, and you say, how is it that this Arian heresy, and you hear about like 70% of the world's bishops at the time believed in this?
Were Arians.
How is that possible?
Yeah.
That they fundamentally believed in something that is not true, is against church teaching. And it's like, are you not familiar with the United States? I mean, come on, like look at so many bishops, so many priests de facto in their hearts basically didn't care enough about contraception. And they would basically say, well, it's up to your conscience or whatever, and then you go into confession and the priests are like, it's okay. I mean, whatever, blah, 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 blah. Like, what? My friend Andrew Walther passed away 3 years this week, and he told me about times you go to confession and confess things, and the priest's like, it's not a sin. And you're like,
oh my God, I've heard that so much.
He's like, I kind of feel like in my conscience it is. So he would use their own language against them. It's like, so I hope you won't refuse this, mercy. It's like, so this is what I'm getting at. You get the de facto teaching of the church, kind of that the church teaching doesn't change, but in practice it does. And millions of souls are lost or are wandering, let's say, in the desert. And it gets frustrating. That's what these guys were hoping for in the synod. They were hoping to have something, I know you said they parsed a little bit here and there, but they were looking for something a little bit stronger that they could build a plank on and continue going forward with sort of a false teaching.
Yeah, but to return to why wasn't it worse? And I think the Arian heresy, that terrible time in the church, is such a great analogy for what's going on right now, because who came out of that, right? We got Saint Athanasius, and we're seeing guys now take, and women too, take a stand, and it's because of them that the truth will persist. And again, you've got it right, Josh, that the tragedy is that how many souls will be lost in the process because of this confusion and smoke and mirrors and all this, the playing around with truth, which is absolutely cries out to heaven.
If I could too, one of the really inspirational things I've been observing lately, the Eucharistic procession in New York City from Father Mike Schmitz. I'm not here to make anyone, I know celebrity priests kind of gets a bad rap or whatever, but just the fact that very public procession was going on, I saw so much footage from that, how many people that inspired. I feel like acts like that are kind of becoming even more incredible than they already were, because you know that you're kind of going against the darkness. Like, people are looking at that even within your own church. Like, you look at Supich.
It spoke to people's hearts. Yeah.
Beautiful. Like Cardinal Supich said he don't come through Chicago on the Eucharistic procession. So, I mean, you're even fighting people within the own church, but like just bringing Jesus to people in a very public manner becomes even more inspirational when you get all like, we're lost in the heady clouds of the Synod on Synodality. What does this even mean? What does it all mean? And it's like, let's simplify it. Like, here's Jesus. We're just going to put it out in the open, show beauty.
What I love about
That's
that
awesome.
is that something is so beautiful, and most people are like, wow, that's a really cool idea. I'm so glad they did that. And yet, you're like, who could be against this? It's so beautiful. Well, surely atheists are probably not going to like it, or feminists or whatever. Like, no, hold on. I mean, certainly they don't. You had an editor with America Magazine, and he was crapping all over it. Like, they really think this is a way to get people.
I think he specifically said like old white man in public, like thinks that this is going to appeal to the youth. It's like,
he
where's
clearly
race
didn't look
coming
at the
into
pictures.
this, dog?
I
Like,
know, like where, white men.
what a bizarre.
Well, and in fact, most of the processions that I'm familiar with, it's led by people who are like Latino. It's like they're awesome. They're more favored than anyone else.
So if you want to see more of our Synod reporting, all of this is completely free. You got to get in the loop. Go to gettheloop.com. You'll see all of our hard work there presented in your inbox every morning. It's an incredible resource for Catholics. If you already subscribe, share it with someone. You can get some sweet merch. We have a Loop mug that's very popular here. And now we're going to be incorporating more things as well. Get the Loop. It's very simple. If you want to see that every morning, we got some beautiful images in the bottom. It's one of the best resources out there. So make sure to go gettheloop.com. Find it in the description.
I want to bring up another moment that I think was driven by the Holy Spirit. Not that I'm like in on, direct line to God, but we're talking about ways that the Synod was prevented from being worse. Talking about like these lights in the darkness, Cardinal Zen, Cardinal Burke,
and George Weigel did amazing.
And George Weigel was amazing in his coverage too. I mean, it's worth going back and reading some of his coverage over at CatholicVote. But another one that was a little less obvious as a movement of the Holy Spirit, these accusations, this Father Marco Rupnik story came to light during the Synod. And there was some serious sunlight shone on what was going on with Father Rupnik. The accusations against him, for those of you who don't know, he's a Jesuit priest. His artwork is all over the world. It's at Lourdes. It's at the John Paul II Museum in
It's like the
DC.
big alien eyes.
It's the
if
big
you've
alien
seen, like,
eyes.
Big alien eyes, yeah.
Sort of iconographical. But anyway, many accusations of spiritual, psychological, sexual abuse of nuns, of various people in his orbit, abuse of conscience in the sacrament of confession. Terrible stuff.
It's the most vile abuse.
He was kicked out of the
I've seen
Jesuits. I mean, he was temporarily excommunicated. The story broke last Wednesday, the final Wednesday of the Synod, that he had been reincarnated, not reincarnated, having a hard time with that word. He was reincarnated into a diocese in his home country of Slovenia. And this news hits the airwaves Wednesday morning. And the Catholic world just goes nuts. People are shocked, very upsetting. I mean, he's basically been convicted of the most horrible sacrilege and blasphemies. And here he is he's now a priest in good standing in this diocese in Slovenia. And this hits Wednesday morning. 4 hours later, Pope Francis gets up in front of the whole Synod and he gives an impromptu, off-the-cuff diatribe against a scandal in the church. And we're all thinking, yeah, there's a scandal. We just learned about it 4 hours ago. But what's the big scandal? He starts railing against what he calls clericalism. And the example he gives are seminarians going into stores in Rome to buy cassocks and albs and lace garments. And he goes, I just was like, how out of touch can we be? I'm hoping he's completely unaware of the story that just broke.
But from your sources, people in the room were visibly shaken by the Marco Rupnik.
Like slack-jawed and could not believe what they were hearing.
Oh, yeah. Even the Catholic left.
Even
they were going bonkers.
America Magazine was like, this is bad.
They were outraged, which, I mean, I believe them, and they were right to be. But they were outraged and also embarrassed that their side wasn't taking care of this problem and making it worse. So kudos for, I guess for them. It was quite the scandal. It is obnoxious. And why in the world do we have such a problem in this church of getting rid of horrible people?
But I think an important point for us to make here too, like the outrage, I think was even more pointed because Pope Francis had involvement with Father Rupnik, currently Father Rupnik. Some people have a hard time saying this, but what was the involvement in the process of the Rupnik case with Pope Francis that would potentially make people uncomfortable?
Right. I mean, because it involved the Jesuit order especially, I mean, there's no question that the Pope was aware of the case and was aware of what was going on and how Father Rupnik was being dealt with. It's still unclear. There are multiple accounts with different stories about how he got reincarnated, who was involved. It's very backdoor kind of information. So we'll continue to follow that story as much as we can. The Pope did ask 48 hours after his rant against traditional clerics. He asked that the Rupnik case be reopened yet again at the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, formerly the CDF. It definitely doesn't re-up your confidence in the institution, or does the hierarchy of the church actually listen to people? It's all this talk about we're listening to the suffering, we're listening to, well, I didn't see
this is in the midst of a synod where they say the church needs to listen to the lay people more, and hello, if you're listening to us,
what are we concerned about?
Get rid of your garbage,
right?
Yeah.
Abusive priests,
people who are abusing
bishops,
people,
get rid of them.
The universal outrage, I think, makes a ton of sense. Like, if there's one thing every Catholic and non-Catholic can agree on, let's get abusers out of the church immediately. Mm-hmm. Shine a light on them.
Right.
Like, take care of business. The fact that the church is kind of presenting itself as we're this listening, new walking church, but at the same time, not learning from old problems. I mean, so I just want to be very clear about the timeline here. May 2020, Dicastery of Doctrine for Faith temporarily excommunicated this guy for a serious canonical crime, including absolving several victims of sexual abuse in a sacramental confession. So temporarily excommunicated. 2022, he's not even out of the Jesuits at this point. The Jesuits in 2022 finally barred him from hearing confessions, giving spiritual direction, conducting spiritual exercises, or even appearing in public. And then in 2023, he was expelled from the order for violating these directives. So he's out at this point. And it took way longer than it should have, but he's out. And so this news of him all right, now he kind of slithered back to Slovenia was also paired with, this is all interlaced in the Synod too, because his artwork was up on the Synod main page before it even started. And people were putting out red flags hey, why is this rapist's art up on the Synod website? Even left or right, didn't matter. Everyone was this doesn't make any sense. This guy is excommunicated from the church. Why should we have his stuff clearly present for all the people that he abused to see and for everyone to show the hypocrisy of the church here? So,
well, it's the new listening church,
Right. And that's the thing. That's the thing here, is that story breaking, the Pope's reaction, contrasted with the self-congratulatory tone of this final document that we all sat around our round tables, we listened, we're going back, we're going to dialogue some more. Just totally, I mean, how tone deaf can you get? You know what would bring young people back to the church? You know what would bring people back to the church? Isn't oh, look at all the meetings we're having in Rome with
Catholicism.
Each other. Yeah, maybe Catholicism. Maybe bishops going barefoot through the streets in reparation for the sins against minors and against the church with some ashes, sackcloth. Do something crazy, penitential processions, Eucharistic processions. I think that would say a lot more to the people who are in RCIA in my parish than, did you read the Synod documents? Don't you want to be Catholic now?
In which I think 1% of American churches took part of Synod to begin with. But what's so frustrating about this situation as well is having to be on a public platform as a Catholic. Anytime I'm reading comment sections, there's at least 5 comments on you shouldn't say anything about children. You shouldn't say anything about abuse, because this is still clear and present, and rightfully so, to many people who hate Catholicism because they either know someone that was a part of abuse or they don't want to be associated with abuse. I'm Catholic. I don't want to be associated with this. It's it's a huge credibility killer. Obviously, we're talking about for the Synod, but in general, with the Catholic Church, we belong to an organization that clearly still has not taken abuse and abusers serious enough to have a process to get rid of them immediately.
We all know people too. We all know people in the United States who have, are scandalized by this, and they have walked away from the church. And I do think our Lord has a lot of mercy for those people who feel scandalized and don't feel like the church is, a place where they can go anymore. But I think also we have a Lord of justice towards those shepherds who have led us astray. So it's going to take a lot of, there's no, here's the thing. When it comes to the crisis here in the church on this and everything else, and then when it comes to the crisis in our own country, we Catholics do not need to feel obligated and burdened with trying to figure out the exact recipe it takes to try to figure this out. Like, how are we going to get out of this mess? How are we going to get out of this mess? Like, you don't have to come up with the plan. You don't need to. What you need to do is you need to pray, you need to fast, and yes, work hard. And if you're praying and fasting and working hard, then you're moving. And then if you're moving, God can move you in the right direction. But if you just sit still, navel gaze, and don't do anything and just mope and you're scared about the world, that's not helping.
That reminds me, this week when the kids were getting ready for trick-or-treating, because I'm a pagan Catholic wife, we were going to get ready to go out in the neighborhood. And so, of course, like to make up for it in my own heart, I was like, let's watch St. Bernadette while you're getting your costumes on. And so the 6-year-old, though, she's watching St. Bernadette. And she hops down and we're like talking about All Saints Day coming up. And she goes, Mom, I know the answer. I was like, oh, good. Because I'd been like, my head was in the Rupnik stuff all day doing research for this. And she goes, I know the answer. I'm like, great. She goes, we just have to pray the rosary and do penance for sins because Our Lady said so. And then she like scampers off to go stuff her face with candy. And it was great. I was like,
Dang.
Yeah, like you said, Josh, like we don't have to figure this out.
Yeah.
We know what to do. We pursue holiness in our own lives. I love the month of November because here we are with our, I feel like the whole month of November, we have one foot in heaven on the other side. And we have this opportunity to just, step through, remember the dead, remember our final end, and just be holy and pray for our bishops. Oh my gosh, pray for our local bishops to be holy men. And yeah, we know what to do.
Love the message. Well, first off, you have a very well catechized 6-year-old. Congratulations. That's trickle down economics right there because you're very holy as well. But, so that kind of reminds me too of like, we talk so much about the problems in America as well. Problems in the church, problems in America. I think there is something to be said too about like you individually aren't responsible for fixing the entire broken system. I think especially with the spiritual thing, because personal holiness, there were saints were very personally holy in times where the church was a mess or in time where society 100%. Was a mess. And even in America, it's like, we don't have to solve all like the presidential problems or like all the problems with the government right now. You can be a good citizen in your local community. You can raise a family. You can impart good values. You can serve your local community in different ways. Like those are all very tangible. Like Josh said, we need to stay in constant movement here. Like keep going forward. If you just sit and wallow in the sadness, that doesn't really get you anywhere or benefit anyone. So
right. I mean, that's the thing that, when we started this organization 18 years ago or whatever, Brian and I and my friend Joe, it's like, we thought about what Mother Teresa said. Mother Teresa said, we're not called to be successful, we're called to be faithful. And my whole point with that is if you look at all the great times of the church crises, like when the Protestant Reformation happened and all that kind of stuff, who would be able to predict that it's going to be people like Teresa of Avila, Francis de Sales, like some of these great saints that come up, that rise up, they wouldn't even have necessarily chosen it. But, God convicted them and they stood up and they were the answer that we needed. We don't know who that's going to be for the next, 10, 15 years and looking forward to the next 100 years, whatever. But yeah, that's why, I think this work is, I'm always excited by the work that we do with both this LOOPcast and also the Loop emails that we send out. We're just trying to help people understand a little bit better what's going on in the world, what's going on in our church, and to say, you don't necessarily need to know how to solve everything on this. But if you open up your heart, if you pray and you fast and you say, God, I want to work and I want to try to, build up the kingdom, let's roll up our sleeves. Let's do it. Let's get to work.
Yeah. Amen. So now we move into our lifestyle section. Erica was specifically excited about this one.
Woohoo!
So Disney announced on Friday that it is going to delay the release of live action Snow White. And for people unfamiliar with that debacle, it's been kind of a train wreck, to say the least. The actress that was going to play Snow White and all of the media leading up said this is not a story about a girl who's going to be saved by a man. It's 2023. This isn't 1930 whatever. This is going to be a new progressive tale about how women could grow into their own as leaders, which, of course, is not what the original Snow White was about. And even the son of, his name's Peter Hand, the son of the director of the original Snow White, said, "There's no respect for what Disney did and what my dad did. I think Walt and he would be turning in his graves right now." The other element to this that kind of had people going was there was a odd, racially diverse, ambiguous cast of the dwarfs.
They weren't dwarfs. They were not dwarfs. Super offensive, Pogo.
It was a bizarre. Some of the pictures came out from production. Just excoriated on Twitter. Just all social media people were like, "What the heck is going on?" And so they decided Disney is also going to turn those into AI, because you can't be offensive to AI. You can only be offensive to short people. So the interesting thing going on right now is that Daily Wire.
So were you involved in the casting of that time?
Short
I
king.
was not. I was too white. I hit the height right there,
100%.
which would have been sick. I would have. I wouldn't be here right now if I was over there filming with Disney. But talk about white and straight. They are unveiling their version of it, which is straight down the middle. Okay, this is seemingly what the original story was intended to be like. It's more faithful to the script. The actress Brett Cooper, she's a major personnel on YouTube. She has talked about how she's excited to share the timeless wisdom of the story with the future generation. They released a teaser kind of to unseat Disney, to take a lot of the hype, take a jab basically at all of the controversy that they've been getting at and trying to tell new stories. They've also released a new children's streaming service called Bentkey. Erica, I know that you've checked it out. This would probably be a good time for review for people curious.
Okay.
But what are we thinking about all this? Do you think there's that first off, I guess, is the Daily Wire version going to actually do damage? Do you think it's going to actually be like really take away from Disney Snow White?
Well, the indications from the Bentkey success so far are that, Disney might have just delayed this release because we have Snow White and the Evil Queen coming from Daily Wire, Jeremy Boring over there, and people are responding tremendously. So Bentkey, when it came out, and again, this is a streaming platform from Daily Wire. It is not like connected with Daily Wire. They're trying very much to have it be its own business, its own model. But it's smart. The same guys. Yeah, it is. Yeah. It is. It's smart. Same guys doing it. And it broke Google Play because so many people downloaded it. Millions of downloads in the first week.
Oh, wow.
And it's got 180 episodes from dozens of shows already. So they really took the time to backfill. So you can just plug right in, and it's not like you're waiting around for new episodes all the time. We started with Chipchilla. Me and my kids, we watched it. It's the story of a family of homeschooled chinchillas who have adventures together and read classic fairy tales and learn from them. And it's actually really, I can't stand some of the kids shows, the cartoons. It's just too much over the top simulation for me. But once in a while, you need to just plug the kids in. And I watched a couple episodes with them. They've watched more and they really enjoy it. I mean, people are saying it's just a knockoff on Bluey. I'm like, I don't mind a knockoff on Bluey.
The funny knockoff accusation is hilarious because all this stuff is knockoff
it's
of
all
everything else.
It's all derivative, yeah.
I know, right?
It's like talking to someone who listens to music. Well, that guy did a riff on this guy, and that guy did a riff on that. I mean, come on.
Everyone's a riff. They're all just following even Taylor Swift. She's just following a formula. You do know that at this point. Maybe she wrote it herself, but it's a formula. And so if if you're going to watch cartoons, check out Bentkey. And they really are talking about classic tales. They learned about the prince and the pauper and being content with what you have and hard work. And it's a good option. They have a...
What is what is the value to... Because I was talking to someone that I do, and they're talk about how valuable it is to just have a service that they can turn on the TV, press play, and not have to be concerned, like, are they sneaking something weird in here?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I feel like that's going to be so
huge.
successful. Like, everyone wants that, right? Everyone with kids that's serious about parenting and wants to impart good values, like,
oh, yeah, 100%.
You'd be shocked at some of the stuff out there right now where they're like, I'm a non-binary horse. Like, why is the word non-binary even being used?
Yeah, I mean, shows like
horse?
Arthur, shows that, like, we used to, 10 years ago, you wouldn't think twice about sitting your kid down in front of a new episode of Arthur. And now you're like, wait a minute, how did that happen in there? Yeah, why does
Mr.
Arthur
Ratburn's
have two
gay.
mommies?
Tough.
Yeah, and
Well, and part of my anecdote on that, or my response to that, was we would just get our kids to watch, go onto YouTube and you could watch, Bugs Bunny stuff from like the 40s and 50s and whatever. And kids were like, oh my gosh, they loved it because it was actually entertaining. Because so much of this stuff, and because they got this idea, we're going to need to be educational.
it's moralistic.
Sometime in the 90s, and it's just like, it's like, it's so boring. Like, let's have a lesson. Let's learn French. Let's do algebra. It's like, my gosh, just entertain the kids. This is so boring.
Let's have some slapstick comedy. Like, I want to see Wile E. Coyote get blown up. Like,
yeah, exactly.
That's all
Instead
I want.
of and it's like, instead of being like super educational, now it's like super educational plus like Marxist, alphabet stuff. And you're like, great. So you're going to make
The
all the
Pride
kids
family.
gay. Good.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
all the kids are calling each other comrades all of a sudden. You're like, whoa, what happened
Where'd
here?
that come from?
What?
Yeah.
But even my concern personally with YouTube is if you go to YouTube, and like we've done it too. Like,
Well, I'm
little
not
bit,
saying
like,
YouTube's
Not
on
anymore.
their own. My goodness.
Maybe
yeah,
5
exactly.
years
That's what I'm
ago.
saying, because like what's suggested, what kind of ads are played. That's why I think like the Benke model actually really
it's a lot better.
has gas.
It's so
Because
much
you're like,
better.
I could just put it on and not worry. I don't have to worry really about what they're going to find on there. And like the value of that, the peace of mind that comes with that, I think is huge. And to separate it from Daily Wire too, I think is smart, because there might be people that are turned off by the word Daily Wire, the organization, the people like see the news story, so they've just heard people talk about it. But if like, oh, Benke, it's like, and they're maybe generally of goodwill, that they're not insane, like crazy far left. They're like, oh yeah, just like kids entertainment that's positive, and like I can be comfortable showing them. That's okay. And then, that I think you avoid kind of the Daily Wire controversy to some people.
I'm impressed. You said 180 episodes. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's already pretty robust. And they have some programming coming for older kids too. Those of you your kids have read the Pendragon series, there's some really cool teasers out they're going to do the full shows. It's a series of novels by a Christian author, and they're really upfront about they don't want to be political. They're not going to have Trump for Kids cartoons or something. So again, if like that's something that concerns you, you can go check it out. I'd highly recommend it, and definitely an improvement over Disney and Wish, the forthcoming Disney cartoon in which bad white man oppresses all the minorities. Who
And the
then
animation
finally
doesn't
slay
look good
him.
on that either, by the way. So it's like they're slipping. I don't know what is going on with Disney.
For what?
It's called Wish.
Oh, it's a new Disney movie or something?
Exactly. You haven't even heard of it, which is saying something.
I
like-
seriously haven't even heard of it. No.
I know, because coming from the days of like A Bug's Life, Toy Story, like that's more Pixar, and then I know they bought Pixar, but
Pixar.
every
was a blast,
movie was a
dude.
banger. Like Cars,
Yeah.
banger.
Incredibles. Oh, we love Incredibles.
Dude, like everything
funny.
was
Incredibles
so
was
good.
phenomenal.
Yeah.
Like, how did they even get away with doing that? Like the kids lament in that movie is so great. Well, if everyone's special, no one's special. I'm like, oh my goodness, this is so awesome. There's no way the DEI community would allow that now.
Exactly.
Golly.
Syndrome. Yeah, I remember I read a book actually about the founder of Pixar, and I think the key there was like he, of course, was making tons of advancements in terms of animation, because he was one of the first people to put out this 3D animation. But his obsession with telling good stories that
Yes,
everyone could
yeah.
relate to.
That was
the
his
key.
primary
and that's what made
goal.
it. 'Cause
Yeah.
you go back and watch those; they still hold up. Adults, kids,
100%.
and so it's like it's so odd to see such a
Like
prestigious
grown men
place.
crying watching Toy Story 2 or whatever it was. Yeah.
Did you cry, Josh?
No.
Okay, good. I didn't think so.
Go ahead and Josh, I'm testing your crying abilities. If you go watch the beginning of Up,
Dude, I love that. I do
pretty
get-
much
it's
cry at
It's,
the beginning
it's
of Up.
close.
Yeah.
It's close. I admit.
yeah, that's the life that everyone would want to live, basically. Of like, it's just I don't know. Not going to go on in that.
Pogo's
I love
tearing
Pixar.
up, guys. Those of you
I
on
know, good.
podcast, he's getting a little weepy.
Good times. Up. Go watch the beginning of Up. It'll
the beginning of Up is
put you
one
in
of
the
those
feels.
beautiful things ever.
Totally. So, quick section here. Coach was right. Tommy Tuberville. We've had him on the program. He has a steel spine. I think my favorite line I saw is like, I would rather burn down the Senate than allow this to happen, which is like just the sweetest line I've heard from a senator in a long time. Josh, what's going on with Tommy Tuberville?
Your terms are
and military?
acceptable.
Yeah, right. What's going on with Tuberville and military abortions?
Yeah, I mean, this just to remind people about this, the Biden administration in response to the overturning of Roe v. Wade, basically went totally rogue with the law and announced that military members could get free subsidized travel to other states in case they are, let's say they're in Texas and, oh, I'm sorry, we don't let you abort babies, that have a heartbeat. So then the military then would fly these people to another state, whether it's like New Mexico or Illinois or whatever, so that they could abort their child. And, they made a big hubbub about this, the Biden administration, both President Biden and also the Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin. Both men are Catholics, by the way.
Yeah.
And they said, this is necessary for recruitment. How are we going to get women to join our military if they can't kill their children? Which, I mean, just imagine people who fought in World War II, like, wait a minute, why are women even fighting in wars? And then you need them to be able to join so that then they can kill their kids. It's amazing to me. Gross dereliction of duty for us men that we allow the killing of babies anyway. Obviously, that's the biggest tragedy. So Tuberville has been awesome. He's saying, no, actually, I'm not going to allow the United States Senate to confirm people to the Department of Defense, because it's not just like the Secretary of Defense that has to get appointed by the Senate. It's every leader of every branch of the military, a lot of different, minor offices as well, promotions, all this kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so someone goes from being, getting promoted to being a general. That guy's that's got to go through the Senate, and then mostly it's just kind of a pro forma thing. Okay, yeah, it looks good. The committee looks it over and signs off on it. But because Tuberville's on the Senate Armed Services Committee, he can place a hold on this, and he's been doing it. And he said, listen, if you want to make this a healthcare benefit, if you want to make this a benefit to military service members, that they can fly anywhere they want to so they can kill their babies, you have to pass it through the law, because right now it's not legal for you to do this. And so he's been holding this through. Well, as you can imagine, he's been doing this for a couple months now, and a lot of these promotions, a lot of these appointments are kind of like they're frozen because he's holding true, and as you say, he's got a good spine. And the military-industrial complex is getting kind of grumpy about this because they don't really care. I mean, they're trying to kill people all across the world with their military war machine. So like a few babies here in the United States, like, come on. And it turns out that that it was so necessary. So many people are going to want this. And it turned out a study found it was only 12. I mean, 12 babies murdered is still too many, but it wasn't like this vast, demand by so many members of the military to get this so-called benefit. And so the question is, like, why are you still pushing this? And here's the most galling part of this. They're like, Tuberville's the problem. If you just let us go along with doing something totally rogue and illegal, then everything would be just fine. Joe Biden and Lloyd Austin have the ability in 1 minute to end all this garbage, but they won't do it because they're committed to the abortion agenda.
I mean, it's so ludicrous they're blaming him for military readiness, because obviously this hasn't even been going on that long. And let's look at how the U.S. military has been marketed to people for the past, 3-4 years. Force them to be subjected to a vaccine. All the advertisements are like gay, queer, anime commercials. They have like DEI departments in every part of the military. They have drag queen shows going on.
Now, wait a minute,
campuses.
Tom. Wait, did you remember this? No, on military bases. Yeah. Did you hear about this though?
What?
Have you seen some of the new ads?
Josh?
You're talking about the ads that come out last year.
New ads.
Yes, I'm very concerned by it because they're young, straight, and white males in these military commercials.
Right.
Meaning we're probably going to war and I might be a part of it, which sucks. I'm like, this is scaring me now.
The military is like, oh, enough of this diversity.
We actually need recruits
equity,
now.
inclusion stuff.
Mhm.
We actually need warm bodies.
Yeah,
it's pretty scary.
Yeah.
I mean, we laugh about it, but it's scary.
they need the military-aged males that are strong and effective and that would actually be good in the military. Is the subtext. Okay, Twilight Zone, Erica.
All right, I'm going to go with a happy story for Twilight Zone. Let's pull ourselves out of the dumpster fire for a minute. Tammy Peterson, Jordan Peterson's wife, has announced that she has begun the process of entering the Catholic Church. She is an RCIA, and she will enter the church by God's holy will at the Easter Vigil this coming year. And I love conversion stories. My husband's a convert. I'm a convert, my parents, and this was a really good story. And this was a great story too, because, coming off of the Synod and all of that, it's kind of dark church news this week. But this was one of those moments where you're like, okay, what is actually driving, holiness in the church? What is attracting people to the church? And it's not just the fact that she's a celebrity, but I love this story. She was raised Protestant, kind of fell away, search for truth, spiritual, not religious kind of person. And those of you who have read Jordan Peterson or listened to him talk, he's very kind of Joseph Campbell, all the myths pointing up the mountain of truth and all that. But she said in this interview with the Catholic Register, which I'll link, she said she has memories of her 104-year-old Polish Catholic great-grandmother praying the rosary, and she didn't know what it was. Someone gave her a rosary when she was sick with cancer, and she didn't know what it was or how to use it, but she remembered her grandmother. And that link there just opens the door to this whole story of discovering the Catholic Church. She had a dear friend named Queenie Yu, who I think is of Chinese origin, who kind of prayed the rosary with her through this horrible battle with cancer. A doctor said she's going to die, multiple scares. But you sat with her and prayed the rosary with her. And now she's entering the Catholic Church. And I think that's such a great example of, again, like we were saying before, when there's darkness out there in the church, it can become very discouraging. Kind of want to circle the wagons and close up on yourself. But this woman is actually joining the church. She's going to receive the sacraments because of a tiny little Polish grandmother praying the rosary and a friend who prayed the rosary with her. So it's a great story. Let's hope Jordan's not too far behind, because how cool would that be? Jordan Peterson enters the Catholic Church. I'll go with his wife for now, but prayers for Tammy and Jordan. And
he is on record saying the Catholic Church is as sane as you can get, direct quote.
That's right. That's right.
And if I may, to wrap us all on a podcasting bow, there's a lot of talk at the Synod about women becoming priests, women becoming deacons. Women's involvement was a big self-pat in the back, we're involving women now. How great are these, faithful Catholic immigrant grandmothers that basically saved their future posterity's soul just by being an amazing holy woman, prayerful, serving their family, a great resource and person to look up to for families. The idea that women don't have a pride of place in the Catholic Church is unbelievable to me. They are quite literally the heart of the church in a lot of places. They literally pray people into conversion. They take care of people when they're down. Everyone probably has an example.
And it's not like Catholics make a big deal about Mary either.
Yeah.
I know, right? We're accused of worshiping the goddess Mary. Women are pretty big. I had a guy on a train once. I was coming back from DC. I was on the train. This young guy sat next to me. He noticed I had a miraculous medal on. He's like, "Oh, are you Catholic?" I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Can I ask you a question?" I said, "Yeah." He's like, "Does it bother you can't be a priest?" And I just looked at him. I'm like, I don't need to be a priest. I'm raising the next generation of priests. I feel pretty empowered as a woman, if you want to use the lingo, but I don't need to be a priest, y'all. I'm anti-clericalism, Let me be a woman.
Oh. Wow.
All right. Josh, you're up.
Well, speaking of women in the church, Our Lady, the University of Notre Dame. Man. Father John Jenkins, he's wrapping up his time at the most prominent Catholic university in the United States by defending a drag queen drag show that's slated to appear on the campus this week. Now, you're thinking to yourself, what on earth, how on earth is this happening at a Catholic university? And why on God's green earth is this man defending it? But you see, the same thing all goes back to the late 1960s when all these left-wing college administrators got together and wrote the Land O'Lakes Statement, which, by the way, has Cardinal McCarrick's signature on it. I like to get that dig out every time I can.
Talk to Benedictine's president about that. The Land O'Lakes.
Yeah, that was a great conversation you had with him about that.
He was cool.
Yeah, I'm going to drop that interview in here.
The late 60s, all these liberal university presidents from Catholic colleges got together and they wanted to embrace, their hearts were already in it. They wanted to embrace the secular agenda. And they wanted to try to, because they're embarrassed, frankly, about this idea that they're Catholic. I mean, Catholics were the ones who started universities, and yet Catholic university professors and university presidents were embarrassed by the religion, because we were so and we still are in a country that thinks that religion is somehow against learning, when we were the ones who set up these institutions of higher learning.
Yeah.
So anyway, the way to unlock all of this was academic freedom. So that was the ruse upon which they had to say, well, we need to be free to debate everything and not just like be Catholic from head to toe. And so we need the freedom, the academic freedom to debate everything and challenge everything, and not, to prove to Harvard and Yale and everyone else that we're not super truly Catholic. We're academics first,
Please
we're smart.
like us. Yeah. Pathetic.
Yeah. And so Father Jenkins, he wrote, we defend academic freedom even when the content of the presentation is objectionable to some or even many.
Yeah, it is objectionable, because even the students started a petition to get this out. It's got tons of signatures. Like, shout out to the Irish Rover, their newspaper there. I've talked to some people there. They do not want this to happen. Like, I don't.
So it makes me wonder,
students.
Dressing up in drag, this is where gay men mock women by pretending to be women, and they gyrate themselves sexually. And I just think to myself, if that's acceptable on Notre Dame's campus, is it also acceptable to do blackface on Notre Dame's campus?
Academic freedom.
And if that's true, then maybe we can invite Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, to come to Notre Dame.
Yes, dude. Yes. Yes. I was hoping you
Now, the message here for Catholics of goodwill: stop giving money. If you're an alumni of Notre Dame, stop giving your money to Notre Dame. Give it to Benedictine, College in Kansas. Give it to University of Marion in North Dakota. Give it to Steubenville. Give it to Christendom. Whatever. Do something else with your money. Give it to your local Chesterton High School. Do not give it to these places like Notre Dame, Georgetown, Seton Hall. Give me a break. They're over. They're
also
done.
Hilarious too. Notre Dame's endowment, I'm sure, is in the billions, right?
Oh my gosh! What is
there.
your $1,000 really going to do for them anyway?
Right. Like,
nothing.
give it to a place that could actually use the money and maybe build an endowment to benefit students. Like, a lot of these big universities' endowments, they could pay for tuition for people.
Right.
We need to build new institutions. Like, that's why, Bent Key. Like, don't go to Disney. Spend your money at Bent Key. Send your kids and your money and your grandkids to places like, University of Mary. Don't go to Notre Dame.
100%.
Yeah. The Blessed Virgin Mary would prefer you to do that.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. My Twilight Zone. So I was going to do a clip of California Governor Gavin Newsom absolutely trucking a Chinese kid playing basketball. It's one of the funniest videos I've seen in recent memory. And then spanked him after he picked him up. What a wild. That's just like an ad lib. Like, Gavin Newsom was in China playing basketball, trucks, Chinese kid. Like, just such a bizarre. That was Twilight Zone enough. But I was like, that's a little self-explanatory. There's buried the lead there. But so I was listening to an interview yesterday. Two of my favorite podcasters, Tucker Carlson and Theo Von, were together. It was on Theo Von's podcast. He's a comedian, hilarious. I really enjoy him. I saw him live. But the fact that he has people on like Bobby Kennedy, Tucker Carlson, like he just has pretty much everyone on, wide swaths of life. He had a garbage man on the other day who just worked garbage in New York City. Like, he's just kind of one of those guys. It was amazing. That episode was so funny. But anyway, Tucker was of course, electric. I mean, he just has one of those personalities, but they were talking about architecture again. And this is kind of one of Tucker's signature things, talking about beauty. He's definitely had his own Christian journey. I know he grew up evangelical. I think he's even a little embarrassed about that fact.
Episcopalian.
Oh, yeah, Episcopalian,
Worse.
yeah. And he's kind of made jokes about it, but...
Very different, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, he was talking about how important beauty is and how even pre-World War II, if you go to small towns in America and look at their town hall or look at their, what do you call it, where judges are? I'm blanking on the
County
word.
seats.
Their
yeah.
courthouses, their
Courthouses.
libraries.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Courthouses,
Their city
libraries.
halls, they're all beautiful.
They are, I was shocked. I went and Googled some, just Google small towns, like go on a map, pick one. They're like shockingly beautiful. The architecture is amazing. And even like he was bringing up in, with Great Britain, when they were colonial in India, the train stations that they built for the Indian people who, by our today's standards, they believed that they were lesser than British people, that they were not equal. They still built them these unbelievable, beautiful train stations.
Right, it's paneling and beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, just go Google some of the stuff. I was shocked to even look myself. I didn't even really think about this. And so he then was like, okay, now go after World War II. Look at all government buildings built after that, even your local DMV. You'll see brutalist architecture. You'll see drop ceilings, fluorescent lights. And like, there's no like economic reason per se to choose a drop ceiling and fluorescent lights. Like, you could spend the same amount of money and not do that. It's so bizarre that this is the choice. And his point is always, it's a message you're sending to people that you're not worthy of beauty. It's actually a human dignity thing, which I think is a like really profound thing to think about. Because the DMV is signaling to you that we don't care about you. We're in charge of you. You can go along like this is like, an animal processing thing. You can get your little card if you're nice to me. And he of course, Tucker's like, who the hell are you? Like,
it's like hurting. It's like
give
hurting
me my
cattle.
license. I shouldn't even need a license. But then I was just thinking about that concept and just applying it to broader society. And I was thinking like categories since the 1950s of things. If you were to say we're more beautiful then or more beautiful now, I was thinking like how people dress, probably the 50s, what music was like, 50s, how people spoke, conducted themselves, vocabulary, 50s, jobs and businesses, 50s, churches was the big one.
It's not just airplanes, because everyone would get dressed up in airplanes. It went, the 60s and 70s, like, oh, it's because it costs so much money. They're all rich people. It's like, no, that's not true.
Everyone dressed that way.
If you look at the baseball stadiums, like the old highlight reels, like Mickey Mantle, these guys, you look at the stands and the guys are wearing hats and they look great.
Yeah.
Like people, awesome. It's Sunday, don't even look that nice.
Yeah. So like, even if you go into a Catholic church now, like if you go to a Catholic church that was built in the 60s and 70s, first off, it looks like a spaceship and there's green carpet. The people dressed in there are super casual. Like if you were to go to something built in the 50s, you're looking at like a beautiful church with people in it dressed very well. So cities, if you look at our cities now too, anything that's been built post that time, all the most beautiful parts of cities, like Milwaukee comes to mind of like German architecture, gorgeous.
Yeah, the old green,
and clean,
the old town green.
Clean cities. Like if you go see footage, like there wasn't trash everywhere. People were out walking. Diets too. Like think about what people eat as compared to then. How people like physically have kind of let themselves go in a lot of ways. Like you don't really see fat people from the 50s because.
Although I do have to say, the 50s cuisine did leave something to be desired. My grandmother.
Yeah, I would switch it.
The Jello with the prawns in it. I mean, I can do without the Jello molds.
I 100% agree with you, Erica. But like the architecture is so much more
architecture on it.
Okay.
How you dress, totally in agreement.
But what comes to mind in all of these categories, I guess my broader point is like society and all of those areas have become vulgar. Like, vulgar is the word that comes to mind when I think of drop ceilings and fluorescent lights, or how people dress, how people act. What you see in entertainment, it's vulgar. Mm-hmm. And what has been...
It's an all-out attack on dignity and beauty.
But here's the thing. God is beauty. What's been attacked since the 50s? We've removed God from almost all parts of society.
Brother.
In the public square.
I was just thinking like, because to see beauty, it's transcendental, and God is beauty.
Two things come to mind. Number one, there's, in terms of conspiracy theories, there's actually a really good one about this, that the CIA funded modern art as a way to try to go against the communists. So there's a good article on that. I'll pop for you guys in the show
Heck
notes.
yeah.
Oh, I like that.
Because the idea is like, how do you go against communism? They thought the total anarchy of modern art would be like the silver bullet against communism. And so they funded a lot
More
of
like
this
join
stuff
the enemy.
during the
Jeepers.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And
I
so
want to
I
read
think it was
this. I want to read
disastrous,
this
of
one,
course.
yeah.
But then also when it comes to modern architecture, yeah, I mean, I grew up at St. George's, Long Lake, Minnesota, and total brutalist church built, I don't know, 1962 or something like that. And, and it was all spread out and concrete everywhere. And, the congregation is here and here. And you basically look at yourself and
In the round,
and the center of
Round
attention
tables.
is the priest, And I just think to myself, like, I remember growing up in that and I lost my faith. And I'm, of course, not really that much of a shock. And then when I finally came back into the church, I thought, I was robbed. My generation was robbed. It was such an immense, gorgeous, beautiful tradition that it is for Catholics. And it was completely rejected, shoved in a closet, put it up, aside. And you're like, you start looking at architecture now, Catholic architecture from these cathedrals that were built over, centuries, in some cases.
Still standing.
And I just think to myself, we were robbed. And it's like, well, that's a cathedral in a very big city you don't need to be a big city. Like a lot, like you said, these small towns, these courthouses, these city halls. There are generations of immigrants who slaved themselves sacrificially to build very small, beautiful churches in their small towns. And it's only in the suburbs where we're like, oh, we don't need this. Who cares?
Concrete.
We need a narthex.
Spaceship.
I need to justify me being cheap.
Yeah.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
Sorry, Erica.
I was going to say, here in New England, we have the history in the 1800s of like the Italian immigrants coming in, the French Canadians coming down from Canada, and these impoverished mill workers, like you said, Josh, they would pour their resources into building these beautiful churches, which sadly now many of them are shuttered. But those that survive,
because it was a gift to God, to their children and grandchildren, to their neighbors.
right? And it was saying to their kids, your faith is worth us giving up so much to give you this beautiful space to worship God. And I think that point
Amen.
about telling government workers and people who are encountering the government at the DMV, you're not worth it. You're less than human. Here's some fluorescent lights and drop ceilings. It's saying, it's giving a message to people that you're a slave of the state. You don't belong to yourself.
Now,
you belong to
in
us.
secular society, in the market, what was the last institution that held on for a while on the good architecture?
Was it banks?
Banks, yeah.
Yes.
Ooh.
Yes. Why? Because they had to convince people, you can give us your money and in 20 years it'll still be here. So we're not going to have a strip mall kind of like, shoebox, like, hey, welcome to, Schlocky's, savings and loan, like, what is this? I've never heard of this.
They're done now.
They're done now.
by the
They're
way.
all in the strip
I mean, you look
mall.
at banks, they're all in strip malls. They're all online. Yeah, I think the thing I keep just thinking about here is how much we've been, whether it's malicious or unintentionally, removed from our tradition. And our tradition is beautiful, like the American tradition, the Catholic tradition. And I actually do see people kind of almost maybe out of desperation of just like, I'm so disgusted with modern society in so many ways. And so they're just returning back to tradition. And tradition and beauty, I think, go in hand. Not everything was beautiful in the past, but I think much more was beautiful than there is now. I think obviously beautiful. And so I see like examples of like people thinking about food and nutrition. They're like, let's go more natural
Back
with
to
that.
the
Like, what
land,
did we do
yeah.
before?
Right.
Like, why are
Right.
we eating all this processed garbage? Churches, like look at that church they built in Christendom. Like people are getting back to
Beautiful.
building beautiful churches, which is like really exciting to me. I think that like maybe people are finally getting to the point like we're just fed up with what we've been fed here.
In this discussion, Tom, I like to bring up Pittsburgh.
Interesting.
Pittsburgh's a fairly Catholic town, actually.
Steelers.
And Pittsburgh had a lot of money at the beginning of the 20th century. You had people like, Carnegie with the steel and all that stuff. And it was huge. I mean, steel was big. I mean, and Pittsburgh was very wealthy, and all the beautiful buildings that they built, were gorgeous. And then as the steel industry starts to kind of collapse in the 60s and 70s or whatever, and Pittsburgh becomes kind of poor, right, for a while, and not much is changing in Pittsburgh, and they don't have money to renovate their town and build all this horrible architecture, right? And then by the time the 90s come around, Pittsburgh is finally, their economy is diversified enough where they're starting to kind of, dust themselves off and pick themselves up, And by this time, people are like, these buildings are kind of retro. These kind of buildings are kind of cool. And so they kind of kept them, and they didn't completely destroy them. And so I always love visiting Pittsburgh because of that, because it's like, well, they're really cool buildings.
That's cool.
And I mean, not that they're immune from everything else, but I thought a little bit more so than other towns that it looked pretty nice.
Oh,
So,
destination.
shout out.
Check it out.
But shout out Pittsburgh for real. And final point too on like just the disrespect, I think, for human dignity. What could be, because you said you build churches for God, obviously, but then also for your children as a gift. And from the government's perspective, nothing signifies to me more that we really don't care about you or the future than being in as big a deficit as we are now. Spending on a deficit and being like, we're going to kick the can down the road, and we've just gotten so used to that now. No wonder we can't build beautiful government buildings. We're $300 trillion in debt. Like, we just don't care enough about the future to be responsible with our money. Yeah, it's yeah. So anyway, shout out to Tucker, legend. Shout out to Theo Von, legend. But I see a lot of good coming here. I see a lot of good coming down the pipe. That will do it for this edition of the Loopcast. I don't have my reviews on me, so Josh, you won't have to suffer through them. But thank you all for those of you that review. Apple Podcasts, throw us 5 stars, leave us a personalized review. Spotify, you can review us there as well. Check us out on YouTube. You can subscribe, like that there. And if you want to talk to me, loopcast@CatholicVote.org. I've had some really good conversations with some of you. I actually really appreciate the different perspectives. Definitely don't agree on everything, but I feel like I've even learned a lot. I just talked to someone about medical studies and how to decipher them. It's kind of crazy stuff going on there. So if you want to talk, you can hit me there, loopcast@CatholicVote.org. We're so grateful for you all. If you want to support us, Champions Club is the way to do it. It is in the description if you want to help us out there. Other than that, Our Lady of Guadalupe, St. Fidelis, St. Thomas More, pray for us, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye, guys.